Hey there, welcome back to another video. I am Ramona, and we're doing more true ghost stories, ghost experiences. If you like this video, after you listen to it, obviously, please leave a like, maybe leave a comment, subscribe to the channel, go watch another video, any of that stuff. Be helpful. But if you don't want to, that's okay too. I can't tell you what to do. And I could, but you don't have to do it. So, anyway, on with the stories. I was a camp counselor in Pennsylvania for the summer when I was 20. Everyone talked about this gray lady, so 5 of us stayed up until 3 and sat in the field. This transparent lady floated in at the bottom of the field and was gliding around. I started laughing. One guy cried. After about 10 seconds, we bolted, and I really wish I would have whipped out my phone, but I was in shock, and to this day, I don't like thinking about it. I saw a ghost on the battlefield of Gettysburg. I was an intern at the Park Service and had decided to go for a late evening drive through the battlefield. I was on Confederate Avenue near the Robert E. Lee Monument, where on the third day of the battle, Pickett's charge stepped off. There was a light mist on the ground as the daylight fades away. Through the mist, I saw a rider on a horse galloping parallel to me as if he were a courier with a message. Also, during my time as an intern at Gettysburg, I lived on a farm that was used as a field hospital during the battle. I could always hear footsteps coming to my living quarters as I was on the second floor of this outbuilding, but no one was ever there. That's slightly terrifying. um, let's see. Minutes after my mom passed from pancreatic cancer, one of her wind chimes made sound. Not just a faint sound. Mind you, this was in her living room, where there was no fans or central air running, and no pets in the house. We heard it from the bedroom as she was being carried out. Well, more of an unexplainable experience, I guess. This occurred in a house I lived in from age 3 to 10, and my uncles then moved in after we left. While we lived there, I and several others experienced many inexplicable sounds, such as footsteps and disembodied voices. This continued to occur until after we moved. My brother also claimed to have seen a residual apparition several times around 2:30 to 3 a.m. One particular day stands out to me, though. I went to visit during spring break and stay a few days. It was a pleasant day with temps in the mid-70s. However, inside felt like the dead of winter. My uncle and I had to bundle up in blankets to try to stay warm. It was cold enough inside to see our breath. When my uncle tried to light the heater, the pilot would immediately blow out. We had to go outside just to warm up. It took hours for the house to heat up. How to match how it felt outdoors. That's kind of creepy, yeah. My best friend growing up is my best friend still. Pretty cool. Obviously, we know each other very well. My mom and her mom were good friends, and so were our dads. Her sisters babysat my brother and I. We do not bullshit each other, not ever. Anyhow, her family has an old card table in their basement. Not sure how many generations old it is. Its name is Arthur. This sounds ridiculous, but the table would raise up off the floor if 2 of the family members laid their hands on it. It was kind of like a family member, so they would let me play as I was kind of like a family member, so they let me play as well. Not always, though. Sitting on chairs and on the same side of the table, we would lay our hands on the top of it. Sometimes it would raise up and play a game with us, and sometimes it would not. It would raise itself up and then back down as if it was answering yes to a question. We would pose to it and would raise up and lower itself twice if the answer was no. We would ask it either mundane questions or scary questions, just being stupid kids with no regard to our real futures. One summer day when my friend and I were teens, we were playing with Arthur in her basement with another friend of ours. We decided we needed to be able to test Arthur out, like ask him a question that none of us knew the answer to, so we could confirm none of us were influencing the table's answers. Sorry, this is long. I asked it about an old pinky bank in my room that I'd had for years. It was the type where you had to ruin it to get the money inside. I threw change in there, and once in a while, $1. No idea at all how much was in there at all, but since I'd had it as a kid and had never opened it. We were like, let's see if Arthur can tell us something none of us know the answer to. We asked the table specific amounts of money until we got an exact yes. From after it going through the long process of exact dollars and cents. It was like $134.17 or something. It just cracked up that we were even doing this. We rode our bikes back to my house after this table session and smashed the piggy bank open with a hammer. We excitedly counted out the money together. It was mainly all coins. The amount inside was exactly what the table said it was. Effing weird. Yeah, that's a little much. I was about 5 or 6 years old, and a lot of the time I would look out my window at night after my mom put me to bed. I lived in a quiet cul-de-sac an hour away from New York City in a semi-wooded area. One night, when I was looking out, I saw a woman sitting on top of a tree at my neighbor's property. The lady was wearing a dress, and she had a pleasant smile on her face. I could see every detail of her body and dress, but I could also see through her. I freaked out and called my mom, and my dad and my sister came to the window. I kept telling them that there was something in the tree, but after a few seconds it was obvious they couldn't see her. I ended up going to bed terrified, although the lady doesn't seem malicious. It was scary, and that I was the only one who saw her. In the morning she was gone. The next night I looked outside, and she wasn't on the tree. However, she was on top of the chimney of the neighbor's roof. I didn't call anyone to my room and went to sleep. The next morning an ambulance was at the house. The grandpa living there with his family had passed that night. I like to think that it was his wife or a family member coming to help him pass. When I was about 13, my parents would go for a walk around the block every night for an hour or two. They waited until my brothers were in bed, and I could call them to the house phone if there was ever an emergency. I used this as an opportunity to talk to my friends on the phone. I wasn't allowed a cell phone at my age. This was maybe 16 years ago. The house we lived in had a lot of creepy shit happen, and this was one of the most undeniable. It's not in my head thing. My youngest brother started crying. I got off the phone, went and got him, and brought him to the living room with me so he didn't wake anybody else up. I had 4 little brothers. The living room and kitchen were separated by a low wall and an open doorway. The kitchen had a sliding glass door that led into the fenced backyard and a very small concrete porch that was crumbling around the edges. My little brother had calmed down, but I could hear loud tapping coming from the sliding door. I turned the porch light on, the light switch in the living room, and peeked in the kitchen. There were chunks of the crumbling concrete from around the porch hitting the door, like someone was picking them up and tossing them, but nobody was there. The yard was relatively small and lit the yard well enough that you could see almost all of it. I could see the rocks lifting up off the ground and getting tossed at the door. Freaked me the F out. I wasn't asleep or even close, and really there was no reasonable explanation. My parents got home just shortly after, and I honestly have never been so relieved to see them, or have my phone time cut short. A good friend hung himself in my home years ago. While I was away at a job, he needed a place to crash after a bad breakup and moving out. Great guy, super talented, played music with him. Sensitive, sweet guy with some self-destructive behavior. I didn't realize the depth of some underlying problems he was having. I've digested a lot of the guilt and internal lingering issues from the experience. I came back from that winter job in February of a bad winter that year. Found his body. It had been there for almost a week at least. Helped take him down, clean up, etc. I'm still at the same place about 12 years later. I see him all the time. The way I found him, and just other things, playing music, hearing his guitar riffs, his laugh. Sometimes I'll talk to him a bit. Sometimes it's spooky as hell, and sometimes it's not. It's almost comforting. He doesn't respond or interact to anything. I do see him all the time, as real as anything, right in front of me. I'll sometimes think about reaching out and trying to see, but never can do it. Walking home from work one day, our route home took us past a very old church with a small graveyard behind it. While passing one day, I very clearly saw an old man in the graveyard cleaning one of the headstones. He was all hunched over with a brush in one hand and a cloth in the other. I pointed him out to my friend and said that was sweet that he was still caring for the grave. She turned around and asked what I was talking about. She couldn't see anyone. I looked back, and there was nobody there. We both went over to look, and the man had disappeared, but the headstone I had seen him by was the only clean headstone in the graveyard. I saw him a few more times after that, but never acknowledged him or his existence again. The church was demolished a few years ago to make room for a bypass. We were assured all the coffins and headstones in the graveyard had been moved to a cemetery nearby, but quite a few people have reported seeing an old man while driving down that stretch of the road. Me, my mom, and my grandma are more sensitive to things involving the spirit world, so I'll tell you the most convincing stories and my own, much smaller in comparison. but it's an experience. My family has always been complicated, always a lot of generational trauma, and more than a few who were either diagnosed psychopaths or had a whole lot more traits for sociopathy than normal. So an aunt or grandma taking in a niece or nephew or sometimes their own grandchildren as well as their own was commonplace. In this situation, it was my abuela's cousin whom she was very close with. This cousin had long life health issues and unfortunately was never really able to bounce back from having her only daughter. This daughter was raised super closely to my mom and her siblings, not because the cousin was a bad mother. She was wonderful. She just didn't have the energy or the ability to care for her by herself. So things were going okay, and then when the girl was around 16 or so, her mom, my abuela's cousin, died very suddenly. The daughter was away for school, and Grandma was 2 hours away from home. And since this was the late 50s in the middle of nowhere, there wasn't any way for anyone to tell either of them until they came back to town. To make it absolutely clear, my grandmother had no idea her cousin had died before this happened. The very night that cousin passed, my grandma had a dream, and she said she felt fully awake, but couldn't come out of the dream, in which that cousin came to her and begged her to tell her daughter that everything will be okay and to give her the little red box in her dresser. My grandma told us that it wasn't until she swore she would do this that she was able to wake up. A couple of days later, when she saw her daughter again, she told her of the dream and the little red box, and apparently inside the box was an heirloom ring that the cousin was going to give her daughter when she got older. We still talk to the daughter every now and then, and she brings up the ring and her mom to the grandma every time. Moving on to a much less wholesome story is the one my mom and my grandma both swear by. My mom was roughly 17, and she had just moved back to her hometown with my grandma. One night, when they were sleeping, something woke my mom up. She described it as just a feeling of something was watching her. So when she opened her eyes, she saw a shadow with red eyes staring at her from the corner of the room. My mom almost shit her pants. She threw the cover over her face, and she tells me that when she was hiding under the blanket, that she felt a hand drift over her face from her forehead to her chin. She remembers pinching my grandma hard, but my grandma wouldn't wake up. She eventually fell asleep. She has no memories of falling asleep. And in the morning, Grandma had bruises all over her arm from my mom, and told her that she was awake, but something wouldn't let her open her eyes or move, and she felt a weight on her chest. Both of them swear by this, and to my knowledge, no one goes in that room at night anymore. My own experiences have been pretty mediocre in comparison to them. My most notable experience being when I was taking pictures of my grandma's old house. I could feel it deep in my gut that someone had died in the master bedroom, but wasn't actually attached to it, and felt the residual turmoil, best way I can describe it, of a cousin who had made an attempt on his life in another room. I only knew somewhat of the cousin, but had no idea about the attempt. The death was a complete surprise, though. Apparently my uncle had succumbed to cancer in that room, and I have no knowledge about any of it until later that night, when I was telling my mom these things that I felt in the room. My mom still freaks out about me feeling where her brother died, but other than that, my experiences with the supernatural have been pretty tame and pretty limited. Disclaimer: I don't believe in ghosts, as in people coming back from the dead. However, I grew up in a very old and very spooky house in the UK that was built by house farm workers. It's very small, but according to records, at least 15 people, 2 to 3 families, would generally be living there. I never saw anything, but there were sounds. For example, at about 2 a.m., I'd often hear 3 or 4 people slowly walking up the stairs, but the sound was more like they were walking on bare wood rather than the carpet that actually existed. Each time the steps would stop outside my bedroom door, there was a muttered conversation I couldn't make out, and then nothing. Obviously, I'd open the door and nobody would be there. For context, I was an only child and only lived with my parents, who were always asleep at the time. The noises were always the same, like it was a recording. Another time, I was alone in the house and heard what sounded like a tornado in the spare room, papers being ripped and furniture moving and general bashing and smashing sounds. I was terrified and ran next door to get my friend. Together, we crept up from the stairs to the door. The noise was still going on. We both heard it. My friend pushed the door open and everything stopped. There was no damage, nothing ripped or broken, and everything was in its place. The window wasn't open, so it couldn't have been the wind. There was other stuff that happened, but these were probably the scariest for me. My grandma passed away in 2007. She was living with us, my parents, little brother, and sister. During this time, she was very sick. We looked after her for a while before my mom made the decision to put her in hospice, where she passed on. I want to say around 2008 or 9, where I moved into the room she was in while she lived with us. There was a couple of situations where we'd experience odd occurrences around the house while we were there. There was a girl named Lauren that I grew up with and eventually started dating. My grandma really liked her because their birthdays weren't that far apart. She was over one night. We were hanging out of the room with my little brother and little sis. We were watching TV with me, and Lauren was facing away looking at something on the computer when something that sounded like a whisper went, "Lauren." I kind of jumped and looked around. My brother and sister were unfazed, still watching TV. They didn't hear anything. But then I caught Lauren's gaze, and she went, "You heard it too?" I still get chills when I tell that story. It was clear as day, but the fact that only me and Lauren heard it was super weird. In this same house, me and my mom and my little brother, who may have been 5 or 6 at the time, were sitting at the kitchen table having breakfast. All of a sudden he goes, "I saw Grandma." Me and my mom looked at each other, confused. She's like, "Where?" And he goes, "In a red brick house." That house was literally red bricked. We just kind of left it at that. I was at Waverly Hills Sanatorium and was walking with a tour guide asking a question when something crawled across the floor from one side of the hallway to the other. It was about 8 foot wide hallway, and it crawled across in a matter of 1 second. It was very quick. Both the tour guide and I stopped at the same time, and she asked, "Did you see that too?" There was a little bit of light coming from the moon, and she had a small flashlight too, so the hallway was lit up. We were in the front of the group, so there's no way we could have seen a shadow from anyone behind us or from us. It didn't scare me as much as I thought it would have, but it was definitely unsettling. I have 2 quick stories. I live in a townhouse that was built in the late 80s. Nothing around there but farmland. Nothing really of not to speak of regarding the land itself. I'm outside of Philadelphia, PA. Anyway, the only thing that was notable was in the next row of houses. There was a house that had 2 people commit suicide inside from both families with years in between. It's near the mailboxes, and I always felt weird near the place. All in my head, I'm sure. So when I was still living alone, about 20 years ago, I was watching TV in the family room, and this cloud of thick black smoke manifested above my head near the ceiling to the right of me, and then it shot across the room and went through the ceiling and wall. It was like the smoke monster on the show Lost. I remember being more astounded than scared. Still don't know what it was. Maybe someone on here can enlighten me. One more. When I was 13, my dog Andre died. He was a gray and white poodle. He was another old dog and died of natural causes in the living room. Came home from seeing Back to the Future to find him on the floor like one of the at walkers for Empire at a downward dog pose. Anyway, the next day I'm upstairs playing Nintendo in my mom's room, and here comes Andre into the room. I hear his nails on the hardwood floor and see him out of the corner of my eye. I think nothing of it until dinner time when it hit me. My wife saw a ghost upstairs in our bedroom, but that's as far as experiences for now. I live in a Victorian house that's almost 130 years old, and all sorts used to freak me out. Sounds, footsteps, bathroom doors slammed open when I was having a dump, and gave me a panic attack. Creepy vibes out of nowhere that made me feel so scared I had to run out of the room. Then I had a kid who was a little terror, a proper effing handful 24/7, and I generally believe wherever was there before couldn't cope with my kid and left. It was after the terrible twos. I now feel nothing scary at all. Hear no sounds. A bit boring, actually. And this will be the last one. Ready? I didn't believe in ghosts until I saw my mom getting possessed. I kid you not. My mom would randomly get up in the night and would sing Russian songs. And this woman doesn't even know English, just Hindi and our native language. And I was in my early teens. My dad would send me to college and told me not to come until this matter was sorted out. It took 2 years for her to become normal. It was hell for me. I missed my parents. My father would call me about once every 4 months, just to inform me how they were doing. When I would request him to let me come home, even for a holiday, he would send me money and book me a hotel. Would text me that he was sorry, but he doesn't want me to get hurt. Wow, that's pretty creepy. But anyway, I hope you have enjoyed these stories. There's plenty of them here on this channel, so go check out some more. And again, thanks for listening and watching, and we'll talk to you next time. Bye. Hey there. So for all of you coloring book enthusiasts out there, I have a couple over on my Amazon authors page. This one here is called the Easy to Color coloring book. It's good for kids. It's also good for older people like myself that have arthritic conditions, and it's hard for me and not quite as enjoyable to do a lot of those little intricate coloring books. I still love to color. I color quite often. It's just I don't have the skills and the fine touch to do a lot of the more intricate stuff. So I created this one to color and have fun with, and I'm pretty proud of it. It's the Easy to Color coloring book, and there's quotes on the opposite pages for most of them. Some of them didn't take apparently because my formatting skills lack, but keep trying, right? So if you're interested, go look at them. There's a lot there to do. They're all hand drawn, so you know that's something if that matters to you. It's not computer generated. It's all done by hand, which I know a lot of people would say, well, wait a second, if you have arthritis, why don't you just computer generate it? I'm not that fancy, as you can tell. But if you're into coloring or you know someone who is, even if it's kids, you know, buy one of these and leave it. So if you have a niece or nephew that comes over and they're annoying you, you can just hand it to them and no one will care, right? Anyway, so go check it out. Check out some of the other stuff on my author's page over on Amazon. And we'll talk to you next time. Bye.